Welcome to another in the series of Outstanding Leaders in Dentistry, a project of the USA section of the International College of Dentists. We're delighted this morning to welcome as our guest Dr. Jack W. Gottschalk from Cincinnati, Ohio. Welcome, Jack. We're delighted that you've been able to take time to sit here and talk with us about who you are and your views of dentistry. As you know, this series is kept in the National Museum of Dentistry in Baltimore for everyone to enjoy. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome, Dick. I'm very honored and flattered to be here.
Jack, as you know, I'm considering you a clinician, a motivator, and a historian. And to understand all of these things, let's start early on in your life. Tell me about your family, your mom and dad, and any brothers and sisters you have, and their impact on your life as you got started.
Okay. I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio. Had a father that was employed at Procter & Gamble. Had been there, ate and slept soap. He thought that my entering dentistry was a real mistake. I have a twin sister. Joyce and I are extremely close to each other, and an older sister. Had a family that was a very close-knit family. The name Gottschalk, sort of like an old German name, was a very strong family too, and had a strong father. I attended high school in Cincinnati and stayed there almost my entire lifetime until I entered college at Ohio State. But I had a family that was very strong, and I'm sure had a strong influence on how I acted in life.
So as a young child, dad, mom were really important and sort of had great impact on your life.
Yes, and had a very sensitive mom. She was a very sweet woman, a very sweet lady. My older sister, Ruth, was probably the most influential. She, from our early age, she was like a mom to me. She was 10 years older than Joyce and I. And as we were getting older, she was the lady that was always handing us out advice and telling us about things that were going on. And I'm extremely fortunate that my two sisters and I are still extremely close.
And does she also live in Cincinnati?
Yes, Dick, she sure does. Lives in Cincinnati.
So those days in the early time in Cincinnati, then you went to school there. Now,
correct.
I know you went to Ohio State, Jack, and correct. I know that you're a Buckeye through and through.
Through and through, you're right.
Tell me what got you started through the high school age to think of on to college, and then where did the dentistry break into this picture?
Well, Dick, I started out as a soda jerk in a drugstore when I was in the 7th grade. I had a dentist that would come in and sit on the stool after his office hours were finished, and he and I would sit and talk. And Charlie and I would talk, and he'd say, "Now, Jack, have you ever thought about dentistry?" And I was a person that was very interested in science. I had thought about medicine, psychiatry, you know, as you are as a young kid. But I also had a severe speech impediment. I had a problem. I had a tough time speaking. And I thought, you know, maybe if I enter dentistry, I'll have something in everyone's mouth all the time. I never have to talk, which I found out was totally wrong, of course. But I realized that in my junior year that I was interested in dentistry. Cincinnati had a father-son dinner, and we had the older dentist would invite a high school student as his guest. And I was there, and I heard the dean of the dental school at Ohio State speak, and I was impressed, and I thought, I think maybe I'm interested in studying dentistry. And so I think from there on, I was bit.
Now, your undergraduate degree, I know you have a bachelor's.
I have a bachelor's, correct.
And that was in?
It was in biological science, and I also had a degree in speech therapy and economics. And I was interested in those also. But I always thought that if I had a tough time at dental school, I could fall onto speech therapy. And I thought, having had a minor problem, I thought that I would probably understand any other student who had the same difficulty. But I was always interested in that, in speech therapy.
Now, other than this gentleman that used to sit on the stool there
yes.
as you were a soda jerk, yes. Are there any other people in your life that had a real impact on guiding you toward dentistry?
Dick, I don't think so. I think that, as I said, my father had always said that he had hoped I would end up at Procter & Gamble. I just knew that I wanted to do something where I was my own boss. I wanted to be able to determine my future. And I knew that I wanted to get in something that has something to do with science. I had a lot of people influence me later in life after I had gotten out of dentistry. While I was in dental school, I had a fella in high school, a gym teacher, that said, you know, you can do anything, Jack, if you put your mind to it. And he was our gym teacher, and he was a fellow that unknowingly at that time, I think, helped shape how I was starting to develop.
Okay, now we've gotten you into dental school. Now, it's one of the interesting questions that I love to ask in these interviews is, what do you remember about those days? What was dental school? I mean, I know you may have had some frustrations or had some really sort of complaints some of us have about how we were treated. What is your recollection of those days in dental school at Ohio State?
Dick, you know how some things stay with you for a longer period of time than others. I remember that I had a dean, Dr. Postal, Wendell Postal, and the assistant dean was Ham Robinson, who eventually left Ohio State and went out to Kansas. We had some wonderful instructors. We had some others that you thought were out to get you, but I think that my dental education was probably one of my more memorable times. I made tremendous friends. Some of the faculty are still alive. I still see some of them. We had a fantastic rapport. We knew our teachers knew us. We were invited to their houses at Ohio State. Dr. Steffel would invite us to his house. Dr. Kitchen the same way. These were days that I was very impressed with. I was overwhelmed. I was a little fearful of getting out of school, as all of us were. You're excited about getting out, but you also have a little bit of a fear. You're thinking, am I going to be able to handle all this? And but I got out of school very excited about dentistry. I had thought about an internship. I had thought about going into oral surgery. I had really loved in school surgery and had removed many teeth, but it was an area that I really enjoyed. I also had at the school a part-time job, and by having that job after school, I had an opportunity to get to meet all of the instructors and spend time with them. So I really had a fortunate, super education at Ohio State.
Well, you're a good ad for those folks back in you graduate in the mid-50s.
In the mid-50s, that's right.
And following graduation, I happen to know that even though I'll overlook it at this point, you went into the 82nd Airborne of the United States Army Dental Corps.
That is correct.
Give me some ideas of what you remember about those days with the 82nd Airborne.
Well, 82nd Airborne, Fayetteville, North Carolina. There were 119 dentists on the base. We had an enormous base. We had 6 different outposts. I was assigned to the 82nd Airborne. I think that the majority of us who were there were students right out of dental school. And we were just in the process of learning things. Even though you got out thinking that you knew everything, you found out very quickly that you didn't really know everything. I had a colonel, Colonel Weber. He was a wonderful man. We had 4 men who were RA, who were in regular Army. Major Moss, he was about 36, 37. He was the oral surgeon. Major Moss decided he would become airborne. And even at age 36, he thought he was able to jump out of a plane. His first time out of the plane, he came down and broke his back. This was a total shock to everyone. Our colonel called us all in. He said, now, he said, fellows, he said, I'd like to help you all out in your interest in dentistry. He said, this is something that isn't done every time, but he said, is there any specific area that you're interested in and anything you've had a lot of experience in school? And I said I had been interested in oral surgery. That was probably a mistake because I found out the next morning I was the 82nd Airborne oral surgeon. And I picked up more experience in the next 6 months than I have ever had, ever. I mean, it was an unbelievable experience.
Well, of course, after your experience with the Army, you came back to Cincinnati.
That's right.
And went into private practice and general practice.
That's right.
Tell me about your partner. I happen to know a few things. Tell about your partner, because he had a tremendous impact on the way you continued into the practice of dentistry.
Right. His name was Dr. Stingley, Charles Stingley. And I think now that Charlie was probably about 55 years old at the time. I was in my 30s. I thought he was an old man, as you all often do, you know. But I had been in the practice a very short period of time. And Charlie said, Jack, he said, you're going to get involved in dentistry. And I said, I am? He said, yeah. He said, you know, he said, it's a wonderful thing. He said, you have to give something back to dentistry. He said, I've served as president of the Cincinnati Dental Society, and I've been on all sorts of state councils, and I was a delegate to the American Dental Association. And he said, you know what? This is a tremendous opportunity. You meet people. And he said, I think you ought to give something back to dentistry. I said, okay, Charlie, I'll try. So before you knew it, I was assigned to some kind of a committee at the Cincinnati Dental Society. I can remember that first meeting. The older men sat up in the first row. The young fellows, if there were seats, sat in the last row where you stood. And it was sort of a hierarchy that the Dental Society at that time had. We heard speakers. I remember how impressed I was. But Charlie said, now you're going to have to start getting active, Jack. And he said, you're going to have to give something back. So I think that he probably had more influence, Dick, on my future in dentistry. And he was a motivator, had a tremendous sense of humor, but he was a fellow that said, Jack, give something out of dentistry.
So from about 1957 on was your early days of joining organized dentistry and giving back.
That's right.
And you started in Cincinnati, went on to the High State Group, and a delegate to the American Dental Association for more than 1 year.
Yes, I think I was delegate for 19 years or 20 years in that era, Dick. I think it was about
What do you recall about the politics of dentistry at that point? Anything stand out in your mind of?
Well, you know, I'm not, believe it or not, a politician. There are people that have said that I am. I'm really not. I am very straightforward as you are. I speak from my heart. I think that even though there are politics in dentistry, I think that the politics back in those days were not what they are today. I was not privileged to be in on the in-group. I was out on the outside a little bit, even though I stood up and spoke. I felt very strongly that organized dentistry is necessary. It was necessary to have it at the national level, at the state level, and the local level. I remember hearing Harold Hillenbrand. I remember some of the early presidents. I remember how impressed I was with what they did. I almost felt like I was sitting in a house like a senator would sit in a house and making these decisions. Although I did see that many decisions would come up every 5 to 7 years' time. We had this sort of a pattern of how things would come up in the House of Delegates. But I was very impressed with the House of Delegates.
And you then, of course, were elected president of both the Cincinnati Group and the High State Dental Association, right, and so forth, and served on many, many committees and still do, and some even though you've been retired for several years now.
For several years, yes.
Tell me about some other areas which how did you get interested in dental history?
That's an interesting story. I have always loved antiques, always loved antique furniture, old furniture. Had a dentist that had an office across the hall from my office in Cincinnati, and he had a couple old dental cabinets that he was going to throw out. And he had them sitting outside, ready to have them hauled away. And I went over and I said to him, what are you going to do with those cabinets? He said, I inherited them from someone. And he said, I don't want the things anymore. He said, I need to have a new modern chair and a new modern dental cabinet. And I said, boy, those are beautiful pieces. Are they out of oak or walnut? He said, I don't know what they are, Jack. He said, I said, well, I'd like to have them. He said, I'll let you have them. He said, I have to charge you something for them. I said, well, like what? He said, $5 a piece. I said, I'll take them. I took those cabinets home. Oh, I waxed them, I refinished them. I thought they were the most beautiful things. I had them sitting in our house as a piece of furniture. Had all sorts of people come in and admire it. Well, that sort of got me interested because I kept thinking, I'd like to know more about these cabinets. I'd like to know their age. It'd be interesting to know who had them. I'd like to know a little bit more about dentistry. And then I started to think to myself, it would be helpful, Jack, if you knew where you had come from, because if you knew where you're coming from, it might help you know where you're going in the future. So I started to find history books on dentistry, and I eventually joined a group called the American Academy of History of Dentistry. And I have been interested in it, Dick, ever since that time.
Now, I know, I happen to know a few. How many cabinets did you end up with in your collection?
I had at one time, I think, 22 cabinets.
Yeah, that's a house full of cabinets.
That's a house full of cabinets. And some of them were back in 1874 was the oldest one.
So your early start in dental history was one of cabinets that were going to be thrown out.
That is correct. That's correct.
Now let me just jump away from history because we want to come back to that later, because I personally know that your impact on dental history has been extremely significant through the museum. But let me go back to your days in practice also. You were a dental consultant to Procter & Gamble.
Correct.
And some other things. Tell me some of the other things that you served with back in those days that has impacted your life, and to who Jack Gottschalk is.
Well, I fortunately had a job at Procter & Gamble. I was their dental consultant for about 18 or 20 years' time on advertising. I was there with a man who was a pillar of dentistry, Dr. Dummett, C.O. Dummett. And Cliff and I were the dental consultants and helped them in their advertising and their ads. It was interesting because it was a whole new facet of life. It gave me an insight into large industry and business, and I enjoyed that. I met people that were unbelievable, that knew things about dentistry that I didn't even know about, but it was neat to be able to tie dentistry in with a business. I was a dental consultant for 3 insurance companies. I had gotten involved with the Ohio Dental Association in a thing called the Council on Dental Care Programs, and we were very active in Ohio and active at the ADA level. So I was asked to serve as an insurance consultant. I enjoyed that, and I did that for many years and set up a company, in fact, of consultants, and had that company for about 15 years' time. I got involved in the Cincinnati Public Schools as a consultant to students who had speech problems and stuttered, and loved that. It was a fascinating time. It was these young kids that were so envious of someone who they thought had overcome a speech problem, even though I had it and still have it. They thought I was a neat guy and I could talk to them and relate to them. So I've had some wonderful experiences, and all of these different experiences, I've met tremendous people who have had an effect on me and an influence on me.
And you also then, of course, were involved with the American Fund for Dental Health. Correct. Which had a lot of impact throughout the country on various things. How long were you with those folks?
Dick, I think I was on the board for a short time, maybe 5 years' time with the American Fund for Dental Health. It had an executive board. I was never on that executive board. I was probably one of 40 or 50 people. The most interesting thing that happened on the American Fund for Dental Health was I sat next to a fellow named Dr. Sam Harris. Since they had us seated alphabetically, and Gottschalk and Harris. So Sam and I met each other back many, many, many years ago, and had the opportunity to share our experiences, and he was a wonderful, wonderful guy, and still is.
And we will talk about him a little later, Jack. But sure. Now, I know also you've been very heavily involved in the Delta Dental organization, and still are.
Yes, I started with Delta Dental Plan of Ohio about 15, 16 years ago. Have served as their chairman in Ohio. I just felt that it was an opportunity for insurance to have some effect, and since it was an insurance company that was run by dentists at the time, I felt that we were able to hear what the problems were in insurance. And insurance was something that we were not real happy with at first, Dick, as you know, as you remember well. We sort of had an adversarial relationship, and I thought with Delta Dental Plan being run by dentists who were making decisions, I thought that they would have programs, and I think that they still do, but they would have programs that I thought would be more relative to any of our needs that we had in dentistry.
So now we've taken you through into private practice and through some of the many, many places that you've served and given back to the profession and the community. Were there any significant players that we haven't touched on? We know that your partner when you went into private practice was significant. Are there any other people in dentistry, we know we'll hit Sam Harris. We're going to come to him in a second. But any others that were just so important to you that sort of molded who Jack Gottschalk is?
Yes, sure are. I can think, Dick, of maybe a couple. One was a fellow named John Reganos. John was a gnathologist. He was from Cincinnati. He taught gnathology. Gnathology was a program that was started by a fellow named Charlie Stewart out in California, and it was to figure out the relationship between your jaws and when you were making and fabricating crowns and bridges and dentures, and you would go in and balance the articulation, and it would help assure that you had success in anything that you did. And John Reganos was a student of gnathology, but a wonderful Christian man who I loved. He had tremendous influence on all of us. And John isn't, well, he's probably now 5 years older than I am, still very active in Cincinnati. But John had a tremendous influence on me because his standard of dentistry was the highest I have ever known. I would have loved to have reached his goals in dentistry. He was the epitome of it. And I would go to his office and watch him talk to patients and how he talked to patients, and see him work and how he worked in his technique and his skill with his hands. He was an unbelievable man, and I think he had a tremendous effect on all sorts of practicing dentists. He was a wonderful guy. I've had an experience, I think, through the National Museum of Dentistry to meet a lot of wonderful, wonderful people. You know, this isn't Mutual Admiration Society, but this guy sitting across from me, Dick Schaefer, is one of my close friends who has inspired me and motivated me. And I just feel extremely fortunate, Dick, to have met the people that I have met and had the friends all over the country and some all over the world. There's a Frenchman in Paris that was at the Pierre Fauchard Academy, Claude Rousseau. Claude was a wonderful guy, and I remember going over there and seeing his museum. And he took me around, and how he talked about his love of dentistry. And of course it was coming from the French side of it, but it was the same as from the American side of it. But you know, there were so many people, it would be difficult, and when you start to name people, you're always worried that you might skip someone.
Right. Well, let's skip out of that because we know that you shouldn't forget any of these folks. Tell me about your family now, Jack. I know, but I want the viewers to understand who your family is and your kids and where they are at this point in your life.
Dick, I have been extremely fortunate. I have a lovely wife, Nancy. Nancy is a supporter.
I will say that's true.
You'll say that's true. Yeah. She's a supporter of mine. She's a supporter of anything I'm interested in doing. She's a supporter of dentistry. She loves people. She is warm and friendly and just a fantastic lady. We have been extremely fortunate to have 4 children. 3 of them are in Cincinnati still. We have 7 grandchildren. The children range from 47 down to, I think, 36, our children, and the grandchildren from 17 to 2. We have a family that is very supportive. We have a family that is involved in sports. We have tall sons, 6'9", 6'7", 6'5", and have a daughter that's about 5'11". And we just have a wonderful, wonderful family who have been very close to us, and we are close to them. We enjoy seeing them. We try to see them every week. We talk to them all the time. We enjoy seeing the grandchildren. The only one that is not in Cincinnati is out in California. I have a son in California and his daughter, who is only 2. And so it's a nice excuse to fly out to California every so often and see them.
Did any go into dentistry?
None of them. None of them are in dentistry. A couple of them are in the insurance business. I have a daughter who's involved in a dental office as a manager of the office and dental office. I have my son was an aeronautical engineer. Went to school at Ohio State in aeronautical engineering, and he was at either Boeing or McDonnell Douglas. I'm not sure now. I've forgotten. But Mark now is employed with his wife, and they are running a consulting company that hires engineers and people in the Silicon Valley out in California. and he has been doing that for quite a few years. We're trying to get him to come back to Cincinnati. Mark is the engineer type. He's very intellectual. He loves computers and things like this, but we are extremely fortunate to have a nice, strong, close-knit family.
And I happen to know that to satisfy the Ohio State Michigan deal, that you do spend a little summertime up in Michigan with where the family does congregate.
You're right. We have a cottage up above Traverse City, Leland, Michigan. Nancy and I tried to go up there in May, stay till September, October. We're finding it more difficult all the time because of some of our other commitments. That I am over in Baltimore some in June. I'm in Columbus, Ohio sometime in September and August, but it's nice to get up there and relax. And it's a cottage, it's an old cottage. It was built in about 1910. We have all of the kids up every summer and the grandkids up. And it's a wonderful experience.
Well, I know you're a strong family, and I will vouch for what you're saying. From my point of view, it's extremely true, and you have a lovely wife. Nancy is just a special person. Now, let's shift gears a little bit now, and let's shift into the area of dental history, because I consider you Mr. Dental History. You know more about it than most, and your enthusiasm for what it should be in our lives as dentists and where we've come from. And so I did not say early on that you are the chairman of the Board of Visitors and the national campaign chairman for the National Museum of Dentistry. Let's go back to where Sam Harris jumped into this, and just give me some pointers of this whole start of the National Museum of Dentistry. I think it's extremely important for our folks to hear.
Good. It's something that I love. I eat and sleep history of dentistry and the National Museum of Dentistry. The American Academy of History of Dentistry decided that there should be a museum somewhere. Now, we have in Ohio, which not many are aware of, a small museum called the Dr. John Harris Dental Museum that has nothing to do with Dr. Sam Harris. Dr. John Harris had been a physician and a dentist. He moved from Cincinnati, Ohio to the little village of Bainbridge, Ohio in 1819, 1820. While there, he brought in 7 students, all physicians, and taught them dentistry. His younger brother, Chapin Harris, left Ohio and went to Baltimore, and with a fellow named Horace Hayden started the first dental school in the world in Baltimore, Ohio, or Baltimore, Maryland, in 1840. I became active in the little museum in Ohio back 25, 30 years ago. Then I realized when we were talking about having a national museum, and we were the only really large country. There are national museums in France and Germany and England and just all over. And I thought, it's funny and ironic that we don't have one here. So with Errol Reese, who was the dean of the dental school at the time in Maryland, and there were quite a few others, we decided to see if we could not have a National Museum of Dentistry. So the American Academy of History of Dentistry back in the middle 1980s, started to talk about it. Errol told us that since the first dental school in the world was in Baltimore, he thought the most logical place to have it was Baltimore, and we all agreed. He said he would help us, and we had even talked about having it up on the 4th floor of the dental school. The dental school, we might add a floor to it. In our infinite insight, hindsight, and wisdom at this time, we realized that we were very fortunate that we now have a separate building. It is not on top of the dental school. But in 1990, we started to talk about this, and we got very serious about it, and I was asked, would I help out? Would I help raise some money? So the first person I thought of was Dr. Sam Harris. We had called the American Dental Association. The executive director at that time was a fellow named Dr. Ginley, Tom Ginley. Tom knew Sam very well, and he said, Jack, he said, I'll help you out. So Errol, Reese, and I, and Tom went and saw Sam at the airport in Detroit. Sam was is a pedodontist. Had practiced pedodontics, probably practiced for about 70 years. But Sam saw us at the airport in a restaurant. We sat and talked. I said, Sam, are you interested in helping us out? And he said, well, he said, I've helped out a few things. And of course, he was the starter of the American Society of Dentistry for Children. He was the first editor of their journal. He started the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry. He started the International Academy of each of those groups. So he's a fellow that said, he said, this is something that's a little unusual. It's different. It's something I haven't ever done before. Are you going to have anything in there for children? I said, well, sure, we're going to have something for children, Sam. I said, museums are educational. And I said, the majority of people that attend museums oftentimes are children. And he said, can you tell me a little bit more about it? And I said, yeah. So we talked, and after 3 or 4 meetings, Sam agreed that he would help us and have the gift, the naming gift. Once you get that initial gift, things sort of snowball, because you then can go to different people and say, we have $1 million. We thought at that time it was a tremendous amount of money, and it is a tremendous amount of money. But we then approached individuals, we approached the corporate people, and before you knew it, we had tremendous support to have this beautiful, beautiful National Museum of Dentistry. And it's something that, as you are aware of, Dick, because you're also very helpful in serving on our board, but it's something that you have to see to really believe. You walk through the door and you're so excited about it. But Dr. Harris was a person who got us started in.
Jack, let's go back to the museum, because I know what a love of your heart it is, and I also feel very strongly about it. So let's give it a little commercial here. The early days of the museum were, of course, tough and were difficult, but you've been with it since the beginning. Can you give us any other early memories of the museum and the people involved and the corporate people, because they have been so supportive of the museum?
Right. Dick, there are many stories behind the scenes and in front of the scenes, in front of it. Probably the most rewarding thing I have ever done is being involved at the museum. When I look and see what we have done and what we still have to do, and I feel that the impact that it's had principally on school children, but I think in the future is going to have a tremendous impact on society, on the public, and on dentistry. Through all of this, we talked a little bit earlier about the corporate support we've gotten. And again, you hesitate to get in and start to name some of the corporate people that you have gotten help from. But the first corporate person to step up was Procter & Gamble. I had known a fellow there, Paul Flory. He had run their oral health program. He was involved with the American Dental Association, served on Oral Health America board, and Paul had been very active, and he had been very supportive of dentistry. And I went to Paul, and he had just retired. He said, Jack, I'll help you out. And he made some telephone calls. Surprisingly, it took 5 years. It isn't something where you just walk in the door and you say, we'd like to have this. Because most corporate people do not support museums. They haven't ever been approached to do this. Maybe an art museum or something like this, but not at a dental museum. A lot of them had a misconception on what the museum was going to be. We have a picture in our mind that dentistry isn't the most pleasant experience. People associate discomfort with it. You wonder, how can you show some things that are going to be of interest to the public? And I'm going to, in a short time here, show you some of our exhibits over at the museum and how they're so enlightening and so interesting. But Procter & Gamble stepped up. Well, once Procter & Gamble stepped up, then you had Colgate step up. Colgate stepped up, and you had ADEC step up. And it evolves, and it's like a rolling stone gathering no moss. We still have a lot to do. As you know, we have a lot to do. We feel that everyone in the corporate world is involved with dental products, dental health associated to dentistry should be up on our honor board. We'd love to have them all up there. we know realistically that's probably impossible to do. But the interesting thing is that once we get people into that museum, they're sold, as you know, Dick.
I know that's true.
They walk through that door and their eyes light up. We have some very unique things. I have here the only tooth jukebox in the world. This tooth jukebox is on the front page of our book called 32 Terrific Teeth, which is the name of one of our exhibits. But the jukebox has teeth, and you will go in, press the different teeth, and as you press the teeth, they come up with old ads and jingles. This jukebox has been sponsored by the International College of Dentists, who have given us $50,000. We have tremendous exhibits in there, very interactive exhibits, exhibits that children love to come in and sit on stools that are in the shape of molars, watch old movies. We have docents. Many of our docents and volunteers are retired dentists and hygienists and wives, and they come in and they take these school children through the museum, explaining things to them. The kids run from exhibit to exhibit to exhibit. You can hardly stay up with them. But it isn't just for children. It's for adults. It's for the dentist to come in and see, you know, I didn't realize that dentistry had changed this much. I didn't realize that an old chair looked like that. I didn't realize that the evolution of the handpiece went from a foot drill even to a finger drill that was a cup that sat in the middle of your hand and you twirled it, if you can believe this, back in the 1500s. You know, we have made such tremendous strides in dentistry. And then you look at the offices of G.V. Black, the father of American dentistry. And we have his family, the Malott family and the Pohl family, that have supported the museum and have given us support so that we can show the history of the influence of their great-great-grandfather on dentistry, and G.V. Black and his offices there. We have a skull from the Mayan civilization that shows where they put stones in the front teeth and the incisors with a drill, a bow drill. You know, I could go on and on. There are many things that show the inventions of dentists, from grape juice by Welsh, he was a dentist, to guns, to chewing gum, to the golf tee. The first golf tee was formed by a dentist because they used to have little piles of sand on the golf course, and they would take it and pile it up. And he thought, you know, this is silly. Why don't we have something that is permanent? So he went back and with his dental handpiece shaped the first golf tee. But these are some of the interesting things that we have at the museum. And of course, one of the most famous are George Washington's teeth, and all of the stories about George. And the story of George having a set of wooden teeth is not, as you know, true. He had maybe teeth that had wooden pegs in them for support to help hold the teeth, but George's teeth were made out of ivory or out of bone. We have a set of his teeth at the museum. And for all of you that are really true historians and love George Washington and our presidents, look sometime at different pictures of George, either painted by Stewart or Gilbert or Peel or whoever it was that did these pictures. You'll see that he had a totally different profile in every picture. The reason for this was that George's teeth, when he kept them in, were so uncomfortable, he would take them out and the artist would stuff his mouth with cotton or gauze. And so every time it was stuffed as he sat there to have his painting done, it was totally different because it was never stuffed the same way every time. But George suffered through horrible things, and at age 23 was in pain from all of his dental problems. Eventually lost all of his teeth. It was even said that he made some of his decisions going across the Potomac and things on his dental problems at the time. He would speed up something or slow it down. For one of his inaugural addresses, he never stood up and gave it because he was in such dental pain. So it's interesting, and when you know these things and you tie them in, and as I am sitting talking about George's teeth, I remember the Tarson family, and the Tarson family, Mr. Tarson was the CEO of the John O. Butler Company, and we were talking to the Tarsons. And we had them over at the dental school where we had George's teeth. And we were talking to them, asking them for support. And I said to Bud Tarson, his wife, Linda, I said, would you like to hold George Washington's teeth? And they looked at me and they said, are you serious? I said, yeah. And we put on white gloves. We took these teeth out of safekeeping. We put them in their hands, and I swear they had goosebumps. And when you realize that you're sitting holding something in your hand that belonged to the first president of the United States and was in his mouth, it's an eerie feeling, and it's an experience that is unbelievable. And I just saw the smiles there in their face. And as we were taking the Tarsons back to the airport, they said, you know, we're going to support this museum. We understand now much more about it, and we understand your enthusiasm for it. But it's a wonderful experience, Dick, and it's something that everyone has to see. We've gotten support, as I said, from the International College of Dentists. We still have many people to get support from. We need to have the 130,000 dentists in the American Dental Association. These are the practicing dentists, I think is probably the approximate number. We need to have them give support. It's their monument to dentistry. It's hard to sell something to someone if you haven't seen it. I don't care whether it's a museum or anything. It's hard to sell. You can't sell a car if you haven't seen it. We can't sell the museum, but we sure would like to get everyone into it. We think it's an experience that everyone should feel.
And I know the American Dental Association was early on supportive through Tom Ginley, and with a nice donation. There is American Dental Association Theater within the museum. And of course, Dr. Filer was certainly one of our big benefactors, and still is. He's just wonderful to do that. Okay, now let's look at some of the things that you did other than the museum area. I happen to know that you were named the Distinguished Alumnus of Ohio State University, the Distinguished Dentist of Ohio. You were also given the International Award of the Pierre Fauchard and many of those things. Do any of those stand out? I mean, they're all wonderful. I don't mean to eliminate any, but is there any particular significant to you that was in your mind about those honors? There's many more. I'm just picking out three that I recall. And
Dick, I think that you probably the one that you have first is the most memorable because you never expect them. I have not expected any of them. I did not get involved in dentistry thinking that I was going to be honored by anyone, rewarded for it in any way, distinguished in any way. I did it because I wanted to get involved in dentistry and give something back. I think we in dentistry are above average intelligence. We have a tremendous opportunity to give something back to society, to give something back to our community, to give something back to our church, to give something back to organized dentistry. And I have lived this, and you've heard me say, I think people can give something and either give the time, talent, or treasury when they give something. You can spend the time and help someone with your time. You can help people with your talent if you have a specific talent, or you can, if you've been very fortunate and have made a lot of money, you can share some of that and help these people. And I felt that my opportunity was to give some time and maybe some talent. And I think my first award was probably the Ohio State Award, a Distinguished Dentist Award. It was for working on the small museum in Ohio, which so it sort of had a double thing. I had gotten for doing something that I loved very much. This little museum was having trouble. I dedicated myself to going up there. I was up in the little town of Bainbridge and Chillicothe for about every Saturday and Sunday for probably almost a year if Nancy and I didn't have something in Ohio to do. And I was honored for that. It came as a total surprise. So I think that was a real shocker to me. I think the other ones that have been a surprise, the Ohio State one, I would love to do more for Ohio State. It gave me everything that I have. It has given me an opportunity to earn money and have a nice family. It has allowed me to travel. It's allowed me to do everything because I was a dentist that was trained there. I would love to give more back, so I was very honored when I was honored there. The Pierre Fauchard Academy, which is an international academy, I was very honored there. I think that makes you feel that maybe you've done something that someone out of the United States might have heard about a little bit, maybe a little bit, not a whole lot. But as you know, all of these in their own way are very inspiring. I'm overwhelmed. I have been. I didn't ever expect this. I just wanted to do something and be there to help people out.
Let's now go to 1955 or so. Dentistry was being practiced. What's changed since 1955 in your recollection of our practice of dentistry?
Well, Dick, at Ohio State, when I started out, we started out with slow speed. I remember we had large pulleys that we would put on the dental unit so we could get more speed with it. It gave horrible vibrations. It shook the heck out of the patient and shook it out of your hand. You started to have a hose for coolant, water coolant, to help cool the tooth down. We had the first high-speed turbine. The Borden turbine was coming in around then, as you remember. We had air abrasive, aluminum oxide. It was an enormous cabinet that you sat in front of the patient and had a suction hose to it that took the aluminum oxide out of the mouth. You usually had to have the patient on a dam, a rubber dam. The idea was that you were going to use this air abrasive and you would have a tip that was the shape of a MOD inlay and a bicuspid, and you would settle this down on top of the tooth and take it out and reach over and pick up an inlay and put it right in right then. Of course, it never functioned that way, as I now know, and so do you. Interesting, air abrasion is now back. It's now back in dentistry. When I look at what we went through from needles that we sterilized to needles that now were thrown out, when I look at how we are now a profession of almost plastic. You walk into a dental office now and you're covered with plastic and gloves and face masks and what have you for sterilization, which I know is way overdue. Although there were millions and millions of things that have been done for a long, long time we didn't have all that sterilization. But now you look at the technology, you look at lasers, you look at things that are coming into dentistry. One of the things that I was most fascinated with was I found a yearbook from the year 1910 from the Ohio College of Dental Surgery in Cincinnati, Ohio. Cincinnati had the second dental school ever in the world in 1845, but I found the yearbook from 1910. And in going through that yearbook, a fellow wrote what he thought would be the future of dentistry in the next 50 years. Now, he talked not only about the future of dentistry, but the future of the world. And he told how that you would soon be able to go into a classroom and sit in an auditorium, and they would have big screens that would show you operations that were going on. He talked about moving sidewalks. And he talked about having stairs that were automatic that you didn't have to climb. He said, however, he thought that there would be airplanes that would take people from their home to work. Some of the things he said, of course, were not true. But it was interesting that he had this idea, and he talked about having painless dentistry, because I think probably in 1910 there was still a lot of association of discomfort at that time. So as I look further down the line, I think the era of discomfort in dentistry is probably gone. I think the fear that children have of dentistry is probably gone. I think that we were making such tremendous strides in technology. When you look at the x-rays and the screens that they're shown on now, and you don't have film anymore, and as I said, lasers that are cutting soft tissue but will soon be cutting hard tissue, and I'm sure that they probably have. You have all these things that are making it more comfortable for people to get into your office, and I think we've made tremendous strides. And when I look at all the strides that have been done in health care, and a lot have been done. You look at medicine, orthopedics, and heart surgery, and everything else, cancer, tremendous strides. But I think we in dentistry have to be very proud of what we have done and accomplished in a short period of time. I think since the 1950s and 60s, we've made a tremendous stride. And when I look back at Pierre Fichard, who was the father of dentistry, back in 1678, he was born, and I look at some of his ideas and thoughts that he had in a book called The Surgeon Dentist, a treatise on the surgeon dentist. And he was the first one that said that we were surgeons and dentists. And he talked about how the theory of some type of a bug in your tooth was totally wrong. He said he looked through microscopes. He had never seen any type of bugs in there or worms. He said sugar was bad for your teeth. This is in 1720. He said that when you remove a tooth, you should sit the patient in a chair. Up until this time, the dentist sat on the floor, the patient's head sat between their legs, and the patient sat in front, and the dentist would reach around and take the tooth out, and the patient would support themselves by holding on to their knees. He said, that's not right. We should put them in a chair where they're comfortable. He came up with implants, and he told how he took pegs and put them down in the mandible. He talked about having bridge work done. And when the gold was so offensive to someone, he had a way of enameling it, and he would paint it white or a color so it didn't show as much. Here was a man in the 1700s that had these ideas. Now, it took a long time for a lot of these to ever materialize, Dick. But now I look at how far we have come, and as I said earlier on, even since the 60s, it's going to be hard to know where we're going in the future. As you and I know, the American Dental Association has a project on the future of dentistry. They're studying it now. They're hoping to have some exhibits come up at the next ADA meeting on the future of dentistry that's going to be held in October in Chicago. I think it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to know the shapes of the chairs. Are they going to be hanging in air somewhere, or
Maybe.
you know? I have no idea.
Well, let me give you one final question, Jack. What do you, the Cincinnati native, lived there your whole life, except for a couple of years in the Army, what do you want to be remembered for?
Boy, Dick, that's a hard one. I think I want to be remembered as someone that loved dentistry, loved my profession, someone that can help people understand it more in the future, someone that can leave a heritage of history so people can appreciate dentistry more. They can see where we have been, and maybe it'll help shed some light on all the difficult times that we had in dentistry and how we have come out of them. I think I'd like to be known as a person who cares about people. I love people. I love to help people. I love to see them smile. I love to think that maybe I have affected some people's lives somewhere down the road. I've been an extremely fortunate guy. When I sit and think about it, and I'm overwhelmed every day, Dick, on how lucky I have been. I'm just a fortunate fella, and I'm really enjoy giving something back. And I think I'd like people to know that I wanted to, and I hope I've had an opportunity to give something back.
Well, you have, and I know you'll continue to do that. You've been a fellow in this college since the 60s, and you've been contributing to it along. And the International College, your section is, I'm expressing their delight that you've taken time this morning. I know that you're on the road a lot, and you're doing such tremendous things for the university. Ohio State plus Maryland, where the museum is located, because it is the first dental school. And I thank you personally for being with us this morning, and it's been a delight to have you on this program.
Rick, appreciate it very, very much.
Thank you, sir.
Honored.
Friend.
Thank you, Guy. Friend, too. Thank you.